It is time. Today, we are going to prep the axles for welding. So this is what we're looking at here on the Sterling. So it's been machined, but it needs to be cleaned up. We'll use a sanding disc on an angle grinder and clean all this oil out, all the bushings and seals and rubber, everything has been removed from this axle. So we'll get this cleaned up. We'll have our Ballistic Fab 1/2-inch thick plates welded on. They take out a decent amount right here for the ring gear that gets turned down, but then there's also another plate, an AR 500 plate that gets welded on top of this to add thickness. So that's important, and we're going to do that. See how much more clearance you get out of that? Let's get started. Now, this is the before, and after you bolt everything up, this is the after. So I've got the cover adjusted in all positions here to where it's about in the center of the cover. The bolt holes, because you don't want to have pushed up one way or the other and have the bolts difficult to remove and ruining the threads every time. But you get that all lined up, and then you get this pressed up against it, and this thing is ready to weld. One thing I would like to mention is on the Sterling axle here, the plate that gets welded in on the bottom is flush with the diff cover. The Superduty 60 is not until you weld on this extra armor plate that they provide for you. And if you look down, you'll see that everything's even all the way around. What I did here is instead of putting it just exactly flush with that, I set it back right to the edge of the chamfer all the way down. So a little bit of standoff. I'm going to weld this everywhere except all of that. And so now we need to get the oven warmed up so we can bake the axles. For the time being, we will use the infrared thermometer. Currently, let's check inside here. We've got the back of the diff cover, got about 147. Outside here, 165. It's going to be warmer down here. About 206, and of course the heating element's going to be 700 to 800 degrees. Ooh, I saw 666 in there. Yeah, so the rocks are about 400 degrees. It's nice that they're not exploding. If you have ever tried welding cast, you'll hear a little ting, ting, ting. That is not a good sound. So what you need to do, bolt the differential cover to the housing, which we've done. Heat the casting between 250 and 400. We have ours set to 400, but the casting, I believe, is going to sit around 300, 350 degrees. Knowing we don't want the axle housing to go over 400 degrees, we will limit our welding time and making sure that with the infrared, we're not going, much above that at all. So from there, we will go ahead and stress relieve the welds by needle scaling or moderate to light air hammering, and we will end up using our needle scaler. So air-powered tool is going to be really nice and easy. We'll weld a little bit, put it in the oven, weld a little bit, put it in the oven, finish welding, and then we'll control the cooling over a number of hours. We now have everything set up. We have the air hammer, we have the welder set up, we have the axle at operating welding temperature, and we are ready to go. I'm going to pull the axle out of the oven. Oh yeah. Certainly welds a lot different. That looks pretty solid. freshly baked axles with the shave kits. Oh yeah.
Now we control our cooling 50 degrees at a time.
Regardless if the instructions tell you to or not, Ballistic Fab does recommend welding the inside as well. Make sure you do that. Next, we're also going to weld the tubes to the housings.
Axle truss time. So we've got the inside and outside of the shave kit done, and then we've welded the axle tubes to the housing. And on the Sterling axle here, the truss is very, very simple. You got two pieces that span side to side. You have this joint piece, which looks like a big M, and then you've got this piece in the middle that connects all that. This piece bolts to the differential cover, and there's a couple of tabs that go right in here. So I'll play with that, but after that, this next piece goes on. Doing this one-handed, there we go. So that would be the complete setup. Looks like I need a little aligning action done, but it sits pretty good. I just have to get a clamp. Looks like a clamp on both sides. It's steel, it's flexible. It's not exactly perfect right out of the box, but it doesn't need to be. So we will go ahead and clamp those down, tack weld everything, pull it off, weld it together, and then weld it to the axle. As you can see, it didn't take much. Maybe about 3/16 of an inch. Less than that probably. But that looks a lot better. This is where the spring perch was, so there's some material missing. But that'll get filled in with weld. That looks a lot better. All the crevices, the gaps that we need to weld, they are all tight. Tighter than a frog's ass. We're ready to tack weld this thing. Now that we have the truss all welded up, let's weld it to the axle. After a little bit of cleaning up the welds here and making sure the interior of the differential is free from any spatter, we are heading off to the off-road kitchen to have the gear and spool set installed.